You're listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Matthiesen, Wickert Lehrer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashton Kirsch with the Subrogation Support Network podcast, sponsored by Matthiesen, Wickert Lehrer. Thank you all for joining us today. I am honored, and it is my pleasure to bring in Katherine Sandoval, partner managing our MWL California office, to discuss the wild world, the crazy world of California wildfires, and I guess wildfires in general. Hey, Katie, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Ashton. I'm well. How are you?
Great. So wildfires have been kind of at the forefront of everything right now. I can tell you that a few weeks ago, we had a volleyball tournament for my daughter down in Chicago, and we get down to the city, and legitimately the smoke, the smog from the Canadian wildfires was so dense that you're downtown in the city and you can't even see halfway up some of the skyscrapers. It's been wild. And I know that the East Coast is kind of experiencing this. The Midwest is experiencing this. It's on and off every couple of weeks. But this is something you all have been dealing with for some time, right?
Yeah. And it was, it's a little funny that you bring that up because, I think California, Oregon, Washington, who have had all of these wildfires for the past several years, was looking at the Midwest and New York and you guys had that first taste of what we go through almost every single summer, where we have a wildfire season. The smoke and ash is just so heavy that you can't even go outside. It's not healthy for kids to be out there. You have a sort of what is like a kind of like a shelter in place in certain areas. It really happened a lot in San Francisco last year, 2 years ago, with the wildfires that they were experiencing in the national forest. So I think you guys got your first kind of touch of what California goes through about every year, starting, I would say now, all the way until about November, which we can talk about a little bit more about why wildfire season has changed into those types of months. But yeah, that's exactly what we experience every summer.
Yeah, but it's just not fair, Katie. I mean, ultimately, here in Wisconsin, we have basically 4 nice months of weather each year, and the rest is just terrible. So you have beautiful weather the whole season. I mean, the whole year. So ultimately, it's really putting a damper. It's clouding up my summer a bit. So, but either way, that was my personal introduction to really how huge and immense these wildfires, the impact can be, given the fact that thousands of miles away, we're feeling the impact of Canadian fires. But before we jump into the primary issues here, which will be California wildfires, I want to talk a little bit about you, Katie. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you're handling in California, in the California office, a bit about your practice out there, so that the audience knows you like I know you.
Well, as Ashton mentioned, I am the managing partner in our California branch. We are, I think, the second branch that was created from headquarters, which is where you are. And my practice is subrogation. I do a majority as work comp subrogation here in California. As you know, we have many, many, many employees and many, many injuries that happen, as well as, and that's probably about 50% of my practice. And then my other part of my practice is all the other subrogation, but has now become wildfire subrogation, just because of how prevalent it has been since about 2019. It's really taken hold of California subrogation. There's a lot of different firms out there and a lot of different plaintiffs' councils that are now starting to do wildfire subrogation because of how massive those losses are. So I've been doing a lot of everything, I guess. But I would say that right now my main focus is work comp subrogation, as well as wildfire subrogation, and then auto med pay reimbursement. you name it, I probably do it. So, yeah. And then, just a little bit about me. I always like to make sure that people know a little bit about me as well as besides work. I have two beautiful sons. So I'm a mom after I'm not on the job, I'm doing my other job, which is being a mom, which I love. And yeah, and it's a really fulfilling life I have going on. Very busy for sure.
And you forgot to add that you somehow are able to deal with me, which is kind of a full-time job in and of itself. Or so. At least that's what my wife says.
No, you're great. You're great. You're wonderful to work with.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Katie. So, I mean, it seems in my review of wildfires and at least all of our conversations, it sounds to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but more wildfires are occurring. They're occurring more frequently in California, and they're covering just a much more vast land area. Is that true?
Yeah. And that goes into the topic really of, you were talking about how California had just wonderful weather. And it did. But, one of the big things about California, and at least on the West Coast that we've been experiencing for years on end until this past year was drought. We have been in severe drought. I can't even recall the last time we weren't in a drought except for this year. So, wildfires were happening a lot previously because of the drought. There was not enough water. So you have dry brush, dry vegetation. And when people don't take care of their vegetation, and then, and the fire sparks, whether it be from a natural causes or from a source, an ignition source, you're going to have a massive wildfire burning. And our temperatures are rising. So I know that, I look at our climate, and our climate in California is we're having hotter summers. Today, if you walk out at 8 o'clock in the morning, it's already about 75, 77 degrees at 8 a.m. So they're supposed to be our cool period versus you can imagine at about 1 o'clock when you're in the dead heat of the sun blazing on you, you're at about 100. So the issue has always been in California, it was the drought. So a lot of people now look at, this year saying, well, California had, all this rain, and we did, if you go up to Mammoth Mountain, which is a very amazing ski area, you can still ski today, in July because there's that much snow that they got this year. But with snow and with water comes, again, vegetation. And then with vegetation, you have a period in the summer where it gets dry and it dies. And so now people are like, well, we shouldn't have a bad wildfire season this year. But in reality, we're probably going to have a worse wildfire season because there's been so much growth of the vegetation. And with people not taking care of that, that's going to be an issue.
And if they weren't taking care of it already, imagine, be it if it's a corporate entity, if it's an individual. I mean, if you're prepared for what you typically see each year, next thing you know, you have, 40% more vegetation. It's going to be even less likely that they keep things cleaned up and that they avoid, obviously, the overgrowth and the brush that's going to be subject to, creating that fuel to create a massive wildfire.
Yeah, they need to hire more goats. I will say that in Laguna Beach, there's beautiful canyons, and we actually had a couple wildfires there recently, one being almost yesterday that we can talk about, but one was last year in the canyon. And sometimes I'll drive down there and you just see like hundreds of goats on the hills eating away at the vegetation. And that's a really good way to kind of control all the dry brush that's going on in those areas. But I don't know if there's enough goats in the country that could come to California and help out with that.
Yeah, we could probably lend you some goats from Wisconsin. We have goat farms up here. I can tell you that. So the goat thing's kind of hilarious. I was actually driving back home, maybe it was 2-3 weeks ago, whenever it was. And there's a golf course that has been overgrown and it's been it hasn't been developed or maintained for years. And I look to the right and I see probably 40 goats right in this whole field, and they're just out in the field. And I had to look it up on my my phone, of course, when I was at a stoplight, because I'm not going to be searching Google and driving. And next thing you know, I guess that's a huge thing, right? They put the goats out there and they eat the brush, and frankly, they'll eat anything. A can. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's interesting. I mean, so is that a regular thing in California?
Where I'm from, I mean, I wouldn't know about Northern California, but I've seen it every year in Laguna that they have the goats up on the hills, and eating the brush right around this time because it's dried out. One of the great things I think that you see about California is we have the poppies that, explode in the spring. They bloom, they're beautiful, but then what happens to them after? They all die. And in the summer, in July, it's too hot. And so, yeah, you need to have, goats or whatever out there to kind of manage and control everything, all the brush. I mean, you can't do anything with trees. Goats, although maybe goats can climb trees. I only have seen them eating the dry brush, but yeah, it is something that Laguna Beach does annually to maintain the vegetation on the hill.
Interesting. So before the podcast, before we started going on the air, you and I discussed truly the extent of acreage and how much land is on fire, being burned each year. Give me a general idea of what the actual scope of this is.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what they're predicting for this year, which is not looking great for us. It's about 400,000 to 1 million acres they believe are going to burn this year. And they can only make a prediction. You don't know how it's going to burn. Sometimes what happens is there's actual live burns that happen that get out of control that are done by the forestry services, or sometimes it's arson, or a lot of times, as you may have heard from a wonderful California wildfire story that occurred, was a baby gender reveal, where they decided to do that in I think it was August or September. And, this couple wanted to reveal their gender because that's the thing to do. And they decided to do it in the San Bernardino National Forest, and they decided to use fireworks. So you can imagine what happened. The fireworks went off, and it also caught all of the vegetation around them on fire, and it wound up causing one of the most massive wildfires, which I got to experience because it was so big that the smoke and ash from San Bernardino, if you want to know exactly how far San Bernardino is from Orange County, where I live, it's probably, I would say, about 2.5 hours. But the plume of smoke that was created and came over all the way to Orange County, all the way to the beach, due to the wind. So, we're looking at a really potentially big wildfire season this year. Last year, I want to say we had wildfires burning. I think at one point there was a satellite image from space of California, and half of California was covered in smoke, and you could see it from space, because that's how much wildfires were burning. It's kind of crazy.
That's insane. I just did a quick internet search on when you said 400,000 to 1 million acres. That was the right number, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the state of Rhode Island is, that's larger than, the average of that is larger than the state of Rhode Island. So that means that you would expect a larger landmass than a full U.S. state to be burned in California. I mean, that's nuts. That's just a wild thing to think about.
Yeah, I think I will say in like 2018, which was one of our I think about at that time in 2018, there was about like almost 8,000 wildfires that burned that year, and that burned almost 2 million acres. And I know in 2019 we got better, but then in 2020, and that's just when wildfires just exploded here in California. So I like to use the 2020 date, which was awful, right? Because we were also going through COVID at the same time, but we had over 4 million acres burn in 2020, which was just insane. That year, I just remember we had COVID, and then you had a lot happened in 2020. I'm a big Lakers fan. So Kobe dies, and then you have COVID, and then you have all these wildfires happening in California. And we were like, what is going on with our state? Like, what has happened to us? It was pretty crazy.
Wildfires, COVID, earthquakes, Kobe. Yeah, it's crazy times in California for sure. So, how many wildfires are currently burning in California right now, Katie?
You know, to date, I wouldn't place a number on it because it's not ones that have been in the news. But go figure, we're about to do this podcast today. And yesterday in Laguna Niguel, which is about 10 miles from where the office sits here in California, there was a 4-acre wildfire that erupted. And it was all over our news. I got reports from our Mission Viejo city because one thing that you probably don't have in Wisconsin is we all have evacuation zones. So we know what zone we're in, what color we're in. So if we have to evacuate for a wildfire, they will notify us that we have to evacuate. I got a notification yesterday that it was near Mission Viejo and we were going to be okay. But yeah, we had a 4-acre wildfire that they were able to contain. And I think one of the reasons that they're able to contain it right now in particular is because of the month we're in. California has what is famously known as our Santa Ana winds. And when those blow with the heat and a fire ignites, it's near impossible to contain it. It takes days and days to contain a wildfire with Santa Ana winds. But as for yesterday's wildfire, it was in the canyon. But one thing that, I thought at the moment I looked at the footage was you had these beautiful homes at the top of the hill. And the fire was creeping up there and, you had all these firefighters working to put it out. But the smoke and the ash that had already been created was all over those homes. And so, we can talk about this for days, I'm sure. But, one of the things that comes to mind when I looked at that was, well, all those homes are going to have some sort of claim for smoke and ash damage because their homes were intact, which wonderful. Great job to the firefighters and OC Orange County and Cal Fire that came out and put it out right away. And by right away, it took about 4 hours, 5 hours. It was real hot yesterday. But, there's still going to be damage to those homes, albeit it's not going to be, home in terms of their homes were destroyed, but they're going to have some smoke and ash that got on their property and their vents. And so, yeah, that I would probably say that's the most significant one that we've seen thus far. I think everyone right now, as you mentioned, is talking about the Canada fire. And that one's just so big, so huge. It's, it's spanning across Canada and the United States. But in terms of California, we're just at the start. I think that was a baby introduction to what we're about to experience in the next couple months.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to touch on, and you briefly did, so let's just go into it now, is the idea of just the damages we're looking at, the way that these things come about. Because we're not just talking about, when you think of a wildfire claim, you're thinking of, hey, the whole house burned down or a city flattened, and that does happen, right? Houses do burn. But there's also a lot of other types of damages and a significant amount of money paid by insurance carrier for those smoke and ash claims. Anything you want to add to that? I mean, how extensive is the smoke and ash damage, and when and why do you see that?
Yeah. So yeah, as you just explained, you have what you see in the news a lot, of course, especially in California, Northern California, you saw all these towns decimated. And so you're always going to see that. But there's also going to be the wrongful death claims that come out. And there's also going to be the smoke and ash. And I think smoke and ash sometimes is a little bit obscure to think about, because sometimes it's like, well, if your home was okay, then, you really didn't have an issue. But smoke and ash can get into everything. You had a window open at the time. It just blows into your house. It gets all over your kitchen, all over your floors. You're going to have to clean that up. And sometimes cleaning up smoke and ash isn't just a simple, let's get my Swiffer wet and just, clean the house. Most homes in California, because don't like the heat sometimes. We like to use the AC. We also have a heater. That it gets into your vents, and it's not as simple as let me clean out the air ducts. You have to sometimes go in and replace the entire thing, because breathing in ash isn't good, especially if you have a family, especially it's not good for your health. I mean, I know that because when you have wildfires like this, and the air quality gets terrible, and you get weather air quality warnings saying stay indoors. You can't be outside playing. In August in California, football season starting for high schools. They're doing, there's training, they're getting ready. And I remember it was last year or the year before when we had these wildfires, and they actually had to cancel all outdoor practices because it was just, you can't breathe in ash. So when you think about that, smoke and ash is a really big part of wildfire damages that can occur. And then, to pivot from smoke and ash, I want to say you also have to look at how smoke and ash travels. A lot of, I think, times when you look at a wildfire, you're looking at the specific origin and, maybe a perimeter around the origin. And okay, if it wasn't in that perimeter, then it wasn't the wildfire. But that's just not the case here, or I think in any wildfire case that you have. Smoke and ash travels. As I had mentioned in that wildfire case for the gender reveal, smoke and ash was coming, from 100 miles away, can come from 200 miles away. It depends on how big that wildfire is. So you may have claims not spanning, from the county that the fire happened, but you also could have claims from 2 counties away from where the fire occurred, or 3 counties away, because it travels. And it depends on the wind. It depends, especially when, as I said, Santa Ana winds in California, when they blow, they are fast and furious, and they are going to make smoke travel. So sometimes in Orange County, we'll have a wildfire, but it travels all the way down to San Diego County, and the vice versa. Same happens in Northern California. And as I mentioned, that satellite photo, you had smoke and ash from wildfires covering expansive parts of California. So, one thing to consider, and that I always like to bring up is, when I look at a claim is like, okay, maybe if it wasn't, I would say maybe if you're in Northern California, you have a wildfire, I don't know if it'll reach Southern California. It could, but mainly if you're having smoke and ash claims coming from, a county that's adjacent or even 2 counties, take a look. It could be that. And if you have the weather patterns to show that the smoke and ash had traveled that way, that's something that you do that, is recoverable and that you should definitely consider.
Yeah, I mean, because that sounds kind of fascinating you mentioned how many wildfires could be burning at one time. And I feel like, I mean, that could even be an expert intensive investigation, something I'd figure out, well, where did this smoke originate from? Was it the ABC fire, the XYZ fire, right? I mean, and it could even be that the smoke came from a fire that's further away. I mean, it's obviously not something I know all that much about, but I mean, it sounds like that could be kind of fascinating, analyzing weather patterns and try to figure out which damage was caused by which fire.
Yeah, and that happened a lot, and I speak a lot about Northern California because they had some really, really bad wildfires. In Orange County, we had a singular large wildfire that happened that got really close to my house. But luckily it did not. But yeah, in Northern California at one point, I'm pretty sure there was about, 3 or 4 fires burning. One was caused by lightning. But the other one wasn't. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, where did this come from? And having an expert in that field of weather patterns, wind, what was happening, what was the climate like at that time is really important to have, especially for claims such as smoke and ash, because those aren't as hard to, especially if you're out of the close vicinity of the origin where, most of the time it's like, okay, obviously that's from the wildfires. But if you're farther away and you're trying to prove, well, this is from the wildfire, then you may need that expert to come in and advise you that, yeah, this is from this particular wildfire, not from that one, and this is why.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that a lot of people that aren't in California or handling these claims might not really understand what could, and you touched on it, but the truly extensive scope of damages that can even be caused by this smoke, right? And you mentioned replacement of actual HVAC units or AC units, but also, I mean, I have a client carrier who recently started writing homeowners policies in California, and they got hit with their first wildfire claims, and they were just flabbergasted, is the only way to put it, by the extent of damage that can be caused by this smoke, right? Because one, you have houses that are probably, 3 to 5 times the, national average for the cost. So obviously repair is going to be significantly higher. And beyond that, I mean, it is not as simple as, hey, Swiffer the floor, not even as simple as, hey, let's wipe down the walls with some Clorox pads. I mean, they really need to, for, under most of these insurance contracts, I mean, it's requiring them to actually go in and do an extensive deep clean, even painting, even scraping and sanding. I mean, it's all dependent, but it's really kind of fascinating how much damage in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of damage that an individual smoke damage claim can result in.
Yeah. And that interesting you bring that up, because I think one thing too that people don't think about is smoke and ash have an odor to them. And imagine it getting into your bedroom, your closet, and then your whole entire clothes, all your stuff smells like smoke. Your bedding smells like smoke, and you can't get rid of it. So you're looking at stuff of that nature that you didn't sometimes, you don't consider as damage, but I'm not going to want to come into the office if, I smell like a fire has just burned. That's not what I want. So you're going to have to go in and replace all of your clothing. And then, you're looking as well as you said, the paint jobs, sometimes they'll go in and you have to do an extensive look through the home to see how much of it was affected by it. Because a lot of times, sometimes what happens is insured sometimes don't realize that they have all this ash in their property or all this smoke, and then they start using appliances, and then it causes an issue with the appliance. So there's a lot more than just the simple, air ducts, as you were saying. That's a big one, obviously, because that's very expensive to change out. But, your walls, your clothes, your appliances, all can be affected by it.
And you're seeing you see more and more coverage disputes coming about as well, because I hear a lot about these, be it adjusters, public adjusters, third-party adjusters, who are actually going out following the weather patterns and going downstream of where the fire is arisen and going door to door in a way and telling different insureds, different individuals, hey, we think you have smoke damage. Let us come in and then we'll do the repair for you. Similar to what we see in some of the southern states, Florida, elsewhere, about the contractors that come by and offer to replace your roof and they'll make an insurance claim. But you're seeing more and more of that out there. And obviously that's increasing, the amount of money spent by these carriers. And it's causing all these carriers to dig deeper and also question, the relatedness of, supposed damage to wildfires.
Yeah, and that's what I think really why there's the importance of, our adjusters getting the experts to kind of make a perimeter of how far and how expansive are we going to say that this wildfire caused this damage? Because, you could have some random person say, oh, well, this was caused by this wildfire. And then, everyone's going to claim that. I will say that there are some times where, interestingly enough, there's not just wildfires, there's other types of fires that happen in the city, in a community, anywhere. And, I had an experience where I was looking at a wildfire claim, and I thought it was too far removed from the location of the origin of the wildfire. But then I was kind of doing some research myself of the area and the origin of where this claim was originating from. And it wound up being that there was an actual different fire that wasn't a wildfire, but it was a building fire that had caused, some damage to this property. So, at the same time, although you might have a wildfire claim that is coming in, you also need to make sure that there were no other wildfires, I should say, that were around that vicinity, around that area. Because although you may not be able to subrogate for the wildfire claim, you could subrogate against, the building shop owner who is negligent and caused a fire. So that's sometimes too what you need to look at. They can be happening around the same time. And I bring that up because, again, we're in July here in California. We're getting into the hundreds. It's getting hot. It's only going to get hotter. So it's not like it's just going to be, there's going to be other fires that are occurring that may not be considered a wildfire, may be considered a campfire, but you want to make sure that you're kind of looking at all of that stuff.
So no, I want to just jump into kind of the broader topics of investigating these claims and analyzing these wildfire claims for subrogation potential. Now, Katie, can you give me some information on what you look at when you're analyzing a potential new wildfire referral or looking at just a wildfire in general to see if there may be subrogation potential arising from that blaze?
Yeah. So a lot of times, I guess this is a good topic of like, who are potential defendants normally in a wildfire claim, because usually that kind of segues into, do we have subrogation rights or not? As you know, there's acts of God that happen, and a lot of wildfires occur that way, which is you have lightning strikes, it strikes some part of the forest catches on fire, then you have a fire. A lot of times as well, what happens is when you initially hear about a wildfire, for example, the wildfire yesterday that was pretty small, but it was still a fire. The CAL FIRE will come in, and that fire department for that particular area, but usually it's CAL FIRE, will come in and start doing an investigation. Now, most of the time, they immediately say it's undetermined. They don't know. And then they're going to do some more investigation. They're going to take a look. You normally sometimes can retain an expert. It's always good sometimes to get an expert that knows CAL FIRE, knows the fire authority, so that you can gain a little bit of access to the area. But again, most of the time when a wildfire happens, the access to the origin points or the fire is very limited, as they're still trying to either combat the fire or they are trying to secure and make sure it's safe for everyone. But that being said, a lot of times what has happened, and this has been occurring mainly because of the wildfires that have occurred in the past 5 years, your big utility companies have to report when they have a surge in energy, when they see that there's something wrong, that they have to report that right away, and that's public knowledge. So, for example, we had, I want to say it was last year in the Laguna Niguel, Laguna Beach area, we had a wildfire that destroyed 20 homes, and they had to do a massive evacuation. It was called the Coastal Fire. And one of the things that happened was, the utility company for Southern California, Edison, came out saying that they had an unspecified electric circuit activity that occurred near and at the time that the wildfire started. So that immediately, for me, anytime I have the Southern California Edison coming out saying something, PG&E coming out and saying something, that they have to actually report right away to the public, that immediately I put up alarm bells saying, okay, I need to tag any kind of claim that's coming out of that, because there's a potential source of recovery there. So that's something that's very interesting. Now, what kind of comes out from that is, the utility companies sometimes have the telephone companies involved. The telephone companies are involved. Why? Because, as you know, poles and electric lines and telephone power lines, all that kind of stuff runs through these areas. So a lot of times you're looking at kind of following the reports, following the investigation. I have myself tickers every 30 days, especially for new wildfires, that I say, okay, what has anything been determined? Has there been a report that's come out from any kind of, company, any kind of public utility? Those I immediately want to flag, and I want to say, okay, let me tell my adjusters, hey, do you have any claims like this? Because you should mark them so that we can, go in and keep them under investigation. So that's mainly what I'm looking at when I'm doing my subrogation potential. Now, of course, there's also the ones where you have witnesses that are coming out saying, hey, well, I saw, my neighbor mowing his lawn and his lawnmower sparked and it sparked and then it got all over, it causes fire and then the fire spread and it causes huge wildfire. Or you have, for example, as I said, that baby gender reveal where CAL FIRE came in and said, okay, well, it was these two people. Now, are you going to get a lot of money out of two individuals? Probably not. And they also, I'm pretty sure, had criminal charges against them. So, but again, you're looking for any kind of avenue. Most of the time, though, it's because the utility companies have to come out in public and say, there was some sort of activity we saw right around this time, but they never come out and say, I will let you know, we are the ones who caused this.
Right. And there's electrical activity at that time. And then there's plenty of other situations where obviously, as we discussed, brush can get overgrown. It could be that, these utility companies, they have a duty to maintain be it trees or brush around their lines or their utilities, and whether they do or don't can be in question. So there's definitely a lot of investigation that goes into it. And it's really kind of fascinating with any fire scene, and especially a large wildfire. I mean, the evidence is oftentimes burned, right? I mean, we can't really look back at, the charred ground and say, oh, yeah, this is what occurred. So it really takes some digging, some sleuthing. You're basically like the Sherlock Holmes of Cali wildfires in a way.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that also is why, getting experts retained as quickly as you can when you have wildfires like the big ones that we've had in the past is really important, because they can also provide access and get access to drone coverage. Drones are, a new thing that have been used recently, which have been great. You get to have an aerial view of what happened, and maybe they are able to see the point of origin. Maybe they're able to find some, some spark or some material or some, a lighter. You don't know what they're going to be able to find on drone, but that's also a way to kind of stay out of the current investigation that the CAL FIRE may be doing. But it's really important to always, get your experts in line and out there as quickly as you can to go ahead and try to do some sleuthing for you as well.
And who are you usually hiring? Is it origin and cause, like fire experts, or is there another type of expert you're typically bringing in?
Yeah, you want definitely your origin cause wildfire experts. There are, very big wildfire experts out there. But also it depends on, what the cause is. So if you have, a utility company coming in and saying, well, I saw this circuit activity on this, line, you might want an electrical engineer who knows about, grounding and lines and sparking and arcing and that kind of stuff. Then you also, as I mentioned, you may want a expert in weather patterns to kind of figure out, well, how far did it spread? Why did it spread this way? Where was the wind coming from? What was pushing it? So yeah, there's different types of experts you want, but I also think that's also on a case-by-case basis. For example, the wildfire that happened yesterday in Laguna Niguel, you may want a cause and origin. It's not a big, it's 4-acre fire, but you're also going to want that, to make sure you have the weather patterns, because the homes that you could visibly see covered in smoke, yes, those are going to probably have that claim. But there may be that the homes downhill of it are going to try to do a claim. But is there really a claim there if the wind was pushing it a completely different way? So that's why you want to just make sure you have the right experts.
And even more with wildfires than even other cases, but it's really about the adjuster, the attorney. Their role is to be an expert in selecting and working with experts. That's one thing I always tell my clients when doing training with them on products cases and fire cases like this, because ultimately, these are very specific type of claims. And a lot of times engineering firms or, origin and cause firms, they have a way in some of these companies of, trying to be jacks of all trades. It's Yeah, I'll look at your fire claim, and then I'll also come out and look at your plumbing failure. And oh yeah, add to that. Yeah, there's might be a fire caused by a dishwasher, and all of these things where, I always think it's so essential, and just to add in wherever I can, to find the right expert for the right job, somebody that has specific knowledge in these wildfire claims or refrigerator claims, whatever it is that you're specifically looking for. You want to ask your expert questions and make sure that, frankly, they know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yep. I completely agree with that. So that's why I've really pinpointed a specific wildfire origin expert that we like to use. But yeah, it's not, in my opinion, especially for the fires that are out here, you don't want just a general expert in the area. You're really trying to find a specific expert for the specific type of fire that you're looking at.
Excellent. Now, any primary difficulties, kind of more broadly speaking, relating to subrogating these wildfire claims?
Well, they're long. Again, as I said, defendants, just don't, California in general, defendants just don't roll over and settle. One of the things that you have to think about with wildfire claims, it's not just one claim, right? You don't have one claimant in most subrogation actions. You're going against one defendant. There's one person. In work comp subro, there might be, the employee, the carrier, and the defendant. But in wildfire claims, completely different. You have hundreds of individual plaintiff claims. You're going to have, tons of carrier subrogation claims. So you're looking at claims where sometimes you could have 70 to 80 attorneys involved. And then on top of that, you're looking at statutes don't run for 3 years. So, if a wildfire that happened in 2019, right, the statute only ran last year. Wildfires that happened in 2020, statutes are still running or are going to run out soon or have run out. So a lot of times they are, everyone wants to make sure that when they settle with all the claimants involved. And so it's going to take some time. In addition, as you may know, defendants are going to do their best to try to blame someone else, try to say it wasn't them. They want to do their due diligence. When it comes to wildfires, to getting inspections done when you're involving, the utility companies, they have a big ladder they have to go through to get everything done. So things take time. So I would always, just let any adjuster know this, that don't expect a quick payout, even if it's so obvious that this wildfire was caused by this person. There's a 3-year statute of limitations, and, they're waiting for all their claims. They're going to do their due diligence, and nothing's easy in California. So everything takes a while to settle, in claims like this.
Absolutely. And it may sound self-serving, but it isn't. But also, aside from being an expert in experts, I mean, our clients and adjusters need to be experts in selecting attorneys for these jobs, right? Or the vendors they're going to work with. I have quite a bit of work on these wildfire claims for my clients. And one thing that I've seen from other carriers is, they're sending these cases to, a debt collector, right? Debt collector that sends out a letter once every 3 months, right? That's not going to work, right? There's a huge place in the industry, and debt collection is uninsured debt collection. I mean, it's a huge and important thing for these, just like, what we do is huge and important. But ultimately, you need to find the right attorney or the right vendor for the right job. And these cases aren't cases that you can just send a demand letter to the utility company or whomever it is once every 6 months and then hope to get a recovery. I mean, sure, some of these may resolve early on, but most of them require litigation. They require a firm that has mass tort knowledge. They require a firm and an attorney who knows how to think like a plaintiff's attorney, which is why we always advise our clients, keep defense work with defense attorneys, keep subro work with the plaintiff side subro attorneys. And, that's another thing here is, so I always advise all my clients, be very selective, be careful, right? I would say, think about our firm, but ultimately there's a lot of firms and other firms like us. But be careful on who's handling these things, because you can't cut corners. It can be labor intensive, and it's not something as simple as, a rear end auto collision where you can just send a demand letter and get paid. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. You really need the right counsel for this type of work. It's not a simple demand letter, as you said. I would say 99% of the time are filing a lawsuit because again, it's no one rolls over in these cases and pays out. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, and you can't wait to the last minute. I got a call once from a client saying, "Hey, we have all of these claims. I think it was hundreds of claims, and we need to put them into suit. And it's been with this collector, and they've sent their letters, but nothing else is being done. And we had to go back and say, hey, it's past the point of no return. You should have got it to us months ago." So I mean, that's one thing where these cases are certain cases that we always advise get them placed with the right vendor or the right attorney as soon as possible. Because I mean, it's really, there's a lot of strategies behind, because they mass tort claims or large losses like this involving multiple claimants. So definitely something to keep in the back of your mind. All right, now, one other thing I wanted to touch on, and we briefly did, and I mean, it's kind of been covered previously, but do you have any insights or any recommendations for adjusters or even attorneys handling on best practices and things that they should be implementing in pursuing and investigating these claims?
Yes, I guess in terms of the fact that, the moment there's a wildfire, at least on the attorney side, I like to tell my adjusters, hey, this is a wildfire. This is a potential subrogation. If you have these claims, flag them. One, I do that, and I think that's really important for anyone to do, any attorney to do, is because you're letting the adjusters know, hey, I'm thinking about you guys. I'm thinking about potential recovery here. So I like to send out emails when there are big wildfires that are happening and saying, anyone got a claim? If you have a potential claim, this is the area you're looking at. Like, let us know and give it to us right away because we will keep track of it for you. So I think that that's a really good thing for attorneys to do for their adjusters. Adjusters at the same time, as you were mentioning, don't wait till the last minute. The wildfire claims are not claims where I think in some subrogation claims, you kind of wait until, you're almost to statute, you're, 4 months out of statute, then you file. That's not how it works with wildfire claims. Wildfire claims, if we believe that there is a possible defendant, they are immediately filed. So lawsuits are filed a lot of times within that first year that the fire has happened, sometimes within a couple months. So you don't want to be too late to the game on the litigation side of it, because then you've missed discovery, then you've missed negotiations that may have been happening. So it's really, really important to kind of, a best practice, I would say, is to get the claims and target them, flag them, get them to an attorney, and at the same time, attorneys target and figure out, is there this wildfire claim, this just happened, this wildfire happened, there's potential some utility company came out saying that they might have caused it, some warehouse said they caused this whole thing to explode. So I would definitely say that you need to just be aware at all times, especially right now, especially in the months of July and August, September, October, when we know it's wildfire season, when we know that we're going to have this, it's inevitable that this is going to happen. Flag them, be aware, keep, put a sticky note on your computer saying wildfire, just so that like if you hear something, to alert your adjusters, and your adjusters know at the same time, I got to flag this.
Yeah, and call Katie, right? I mean, I think that's a huge thing. I mean, I'd imagine you're more than happy to talk to any adjuster, client, or, prospective client, or even non-client, to just give them, to answer the question. Hey, we have all these losses arising from this wildfire. Have you seen anything here? I mean, I think Katie and myself, we answer questions like that every day. So as I always say, don't hesitate to reach out in that regard. And also, I mean, another big thing is there's plenty of carriers who may have a smaller exposure. They might not have hundreds or thousands of claims, but they could have, 5, 10, 25 claims, where immediate action and quickly getting counsel involved on those, that's huge, because we might be able to economically handle those cases if we're able to combine them with other claims and be able to, work together to come to terms and make it economically viable. That if you wait until the last minute, your case probably won't justify independent action. So there's plenty of reasons why we need to immediately get involved. Let us investigate it and get, be it vendors, experts, or subro counsel involved immediately.
Absolutely agree. Totally agree with that.
So, Katie, any additional current wildfires or anything else or anything that we want to make the clients and adjusters and attorneys aware of right now going forward into 2023?
Yeah, there's still quite a bit of wildfires that haven't had the statute run. So, if you have those wildfire cases, take a look if they're in the region. One of the ones I spoke about was that coastal fire that was in Laguna Niguel. That happened on May 11th of just last year, 2022. So you still have 2 years of a statute. I know that there was a lot of smoke and damage. There was, lots of homes that were destroyed. And that one was down in Orange County. So, that's one that I would definitely put on your radar if you haven't done so already. There's also, the mosquito fire, and that one ignited on September 6th. And so that one, there is a lawsuit that's been filed against PG&E on that one. And so again, that one happened in Northern California. It happened in the El Dorado County. There was about 13,700 acres that burned there. So again, though that fire, that has active litigation going on. If you have any kind of claims, and remember, claims do add up, as Ashton was saying. So, you may have, tiny little claims, but if you put them all together, that's one big claim that you're looking to recover. Another interesting one that happened was in San Diego. It's called the Border 32 fire. And they call it that because it was on the border. It was near the border crossing of Tecate, Mexico area. So that one, we just want to put on your radar. That one remains under investigation. It was a brush fire, but it did torch a bunch of ranches, livestock, which is one thing I forgot to talk about in terms of damages. You could have livestock damage that has occurred. And so, that's one that if you have that, flag it. We're still looking at it. We're still under investigation for it. But again, it's better to flag these than to not, and then, lose out on money. And then, the other one that I wanted to just quickly talk about was the Fairview fire. I personally myself am involved in that lawsuit, not personally, but I am litigating in that lawsuit for the firm. And that one is a lawsuit that's been filed against Southern California Edison. So any of those wildfires that you hear, but as Ashton said, I'm happy if you send an email to me and say, what about this, the owl fire? I don't know if there was one that's called that because there's different names for every fire. Did that have subrogation potential? I'm more than happy to do some research, take a look, let you know what's going on, and let you know, hey, this might have potential, or it's still under investigation. We still have some time. Let's give it some time. I'm happy to do that for anyone that wants to just shoot me an email.
Absolutely, especially with the fact that we expect, soon, as you said before, these wildfires aren't going to stop, right? This is a common occurrence in California, and with the changing in weather patterns and all the above, you're seeing an increase in wildfires, not a decrease. And I think you had mentioned kind of fascinating even with the increased rainfall, we might see, rather than a decrease, an increase in wildfires. So everyone should be prepared, right? We want to make sure this is at the top of mind for any carrier writing in California, and just know that we are here to support everyone. Katie is available to answer all those questions. I always like to say there's never a dumb question. There's definitely dumb questions, but we want those as well, right? So ask those questions away. Katie loves to talk about these things. And yeah, that's what I have. Anything else you want to add, Katie, before we wrap this thing up?
No, thanks so much for doing this podcast. It's honestly the perfect timing to do it, just because it's heating up and we're going into wildfire season here. And, I do hope, Ashton, that you guys in the Midwest are able to recover from that smoke and ash that you guys are experiencing, but as well as, tell your adjusters, out in the Midwest and in the East Coast area, you probably have a lot of claims that are going to start coming in the next probably couple months, especially for smoke and ash. So just be prepared.
Yeah, it's there's been a few days where it's been pretty terrible, but I mean, I've still gone on and played some golf. It's just a little bit hazy, and my clothes might smell a little bit afterwards. But either way, it's it is what it is. I feel like I'm in California. But either way, Katie. Yeah, no, we have some beaches here. I mean, they're only open 4 months of the year, but we've got that going. We have sand volleyball. We have a lot of golf, but it's what happens up here, the land of beer and cheese. But either way, Katie, it was an absolute pleasure. Everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us today for this eventful, exciting, and wild conversation on California wildfires. Again, Katie, thank you. This is Ashton Kirsch signing off for the Subrogation Support Network podcast. Until next time, have a good one, everybody.